Okay, we're back at homeostasis. Homeostasis is the dynamic equilibrium. All that is meaning is, like your body temperature is a really good example of homeostasis. Our body likes to be within a range. If we fall too low, we become hypothermic. If we rise too high, then we're going to be way too hot and our cells cannot survive at those temperatures. So it's very important for us to stay in that homeostatic state. So not only operating in temperature, but fluids and chemicals. So we'll talk about homeostasis from here to the very end of A&P, ending with reproduction and genetics. So what do we have to have for homeostasis to occur? One, you need a receptor. So you have something out there detecting, picking up information. Doesn't interpret that information, but it picks it up. So right now, it may be the temperature in the room. I have receptors in my skin that are detecting the temperature, and they're sending that information up to the control center. The control center can be the brain or even just the spinal cord. So it can send it all the way up to the brain and say the temperature is 68 in the room. And your brain looks at that and says, 68, that's a little too cold for me. So what will happen is then we will send out information down through an effector, and in this instance it would be a muscle, and you would start to shiver. So the shivering causes muscles to contract and will increase the temperature. When muscles do work, they release a lot of temperature, or a lot of heat, So just like when you exercise, you sweat a lot, it's because those muscles are producing a lot of heat as a byproduct. So that's what we do to increase that temperature. That process that we just talked about, our body temperature is really low and we shiver, causes our body temperature to rise or do the opposite of what it was already. So we were cold and we rose the temperature to hot. That's called a negative feedback mechanism. So our body does something opposite of what it was already doing. Another good example is blood sugar. So if you haven't eaten today, your blood sugar is way down here. And so your body will cause you to break down glycogen and release sugar and cause it to do the negative effect and rise. Because you're starving, you're hungry, you need sugar in your blood. That's a negative feedback mechanism. So the temperature thing, when you're too cold, you start to shiver and your temperature rises, that's the negative is what puts on the brakes and tells you. So we do opposite of what we were cold, we rose our temperature, and it got to where it was supposed to be, and we said stop shivering, you're good. Positive feedback does the same thing. It causes you to, a good example, and one of the only examples really, well, two examples, temperature is another example, but in labor, when your body has this fetus inside of you and it's telling you to contract and get this baby out, a positive feedback mechanism tells you to keep contracting. So your body contracts and it's pushing, it's contracting, and your brain says, okay, keep doing that. So that's positive. It keeps going until you have to have what's called an external brake. And the external brake would be the delivery of the placenta. It ripping off or tearing away from that uterine lining and moving out of the body. Well, we still will have some contractions just to decrease the size of that uterus. But again, that's all in reproductive. But that is the break. That pulling away says, okay, whoa, stop, we're done. We have our end result that we wanted. Another positive feedback mechanism that you'll see is with temperature when you are sick and you're running a fever. A fever can be a positive feedback mechanism. They can kind of go haywire. Sometimes the temperature can get too high and be dangerous for you. Negative feedback, I explained that already, where temperature falls and your internal thermostat says, oh my goodness, we need heat, so we rise the temperature. And this all, again, is the same thing telling us about the shivering. So let's go ahead and look at negative feedback mechanism. Come back over here, follow me. Okay.
To function properly, the body must maintain a relatively constant internal environment. This balance is called homeostasis. Most systems that support homeostasis operate by negative feedback. One example of negative feedback is the maintenance of the temperature inside a house. When the temperature inside the house drops, a thermometer in the house detects the decreasing temperature and sends a message to the thermostat. The thermometer acts as a receptor, and the thermostat acts as a control center of the negative feedback mechanism. The thermostat has been adjusted to a set point of 68 degrees. When the temperature declines below that point, it sends a message to the furnace. The furnace is an effector. It begins to generate heat, increasing the indoor temperature. Similar processes occur inside a human body. When an outside temperature declines, temperature receptors in the skin detect the decreasing temperature and send a message to the brain. Next, the hypothalamus in the brain receives the message that the body temperature is dropping below its set point and sends nerve impulses to the muscles. The muscles begin to shiver, causing the body temperature to increase.
So a great short video to show you what's happening with that negative feedback mechanism. So, question here, equilibrium of what? Homeostasis, and again, the key is here, maintains equilibrium through the process. Process of what? Negative feedback, positive feedback, or shivering. So if you said B, you are correct because that is the process. The balance or the equilibrium is the homeostasis. But how do we maintain homeostasis? Through negative feedback. We will talk about that from here on out, I promise you. So make sure you read your chapter, look for the quizzes that are going to be on the calendar, and be ready for your exam.